My dad disowned me for becoming more successful than his golden child and for starting my own business. He told me I was dead to him. 5 years later, my company bought the company he worked for. He's not dead to me, just unemployed. All right, Reddit, buckle up, because this story is a wild ride involving family dysfunction, corporate revenge, and the most satisfying, I told you so moment of my life. This has been weighing on me for months, and I need to get it off my chest. I'm a 32-year-old man, and I grew up in what looked like a normal middle-class family from the outside. My dad worked for a regional manufacturing company for about 25 years, working his way up from floor supervisor to operations manager. My mom stayed home to raise us kids. On the surface, it looked like the standard American dream. But the reality was very different. My younger brother, Derek, 28, was the golden child who, in my parents' eyes, could do absolutely no wrong. Let me show you how bad the favoritism was. When I was in high school, I had to maintain at least a 3.5 GPA or I'd lose my car privileges. Derek barely managed a 2.1 GPA and still got a brand new Honda Accord for his 16th birthday. Not a used car. Not help with a down payment. A brand new car, completely paid for, with a year of insurance included. I worked at Target throughout high school and college to help cover my expenses. Derek didn't work a single day until he was 23. And even then, it only happened because Dad pulled some strings and got him a comfortable job in the sales department at his company. No interview. No resume. Just, my son needs a position. And suddenly Derek had a $45,000 starting salary with full benefits. Every achievement of mine was met with a half-hearted good job, while Derek received full-blown celebrations for doing the bare minimum. I graduated from college with honors in business management and got a $50 Olive Garden gift card. Derek finally graduated after 6 years with a communications degree and a 2.3 GPA, and Mom threw a party with around 40 people, catered food, and all the extras. The double standards were so obvious they could have been the plot of a reality TV show. Still, I kept my head down, worked hard, saved money, and convinced myself that eventually my parents would recognize my value. Spoiler alert, they never did. After college, I landed a solid position in operations management at a mid-sized tech company. I learned everything I could about supply chain logistics, vendor relationships, and manufacturing processes. The company produced industrial components, not glamorous work, but it was steady business with strong margins when managed efficiently. I spent 3 years there working my tail off, volunteering for extra projects, and absorbing everything I could about the industry. Meanwhile, Derek coasted through his sales job at Dad's company, essentially getting paid to take clients out for lunch and golf. At family dinners, he'd brag about his big deals, which were usually just repeat orders from existing clients. Dad acted like Derek was signing Fortune 500 contracts. Around my 3rd year at work, I started noticing major inefficiencies in our supply chain. We relied on outdated distributors who charged ridiculous markups and had terrible lead times. I began researching alternatives, building direct relationships with manufacturers, and identifying better pricing structures. Unfortunately, my boss was an old-school manager who didn't want to hear new ideas from someone younger. Every proposal I brought him was rejected. He constantly told me to stay in my lane and do what I was told. It was the classic, if it ain't broke, don't fix it mindset. The problem was, it was broken, they just couldn't see it. That's when I had my first real moment of clarity. I was 28 years old, sitting in my apartment looking over spreadsheets I'd built during my free time, and I thought, why am I trying to fix someone else's company when I could build my own? The concept was simple. Eliminate the middlemen in industrial supply chains, connect manufacturers directly with end users, streamline logistics, and use modern technology instead of relying on fax machines and endless phone calls like so many companies in the industry still did. It wasn't some revolutionary idea, but nobody was executing it efficiently. For 6 months, I planned everything while still working my day job. I created a business plan, identified potential clients, mapped out the technology infrastructure, and saved every dollar I could. I lived on ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches so I could put as much money aside as possible. When I finally had enough savings to cover 6 months of basic operating expenses, I handed in my 2-week notice. My boss literally laughed in my face. You're going to start your own company in this industry? Good luck, kid. You'll be back in 6 months begging for your job back. That should have been my first clue that being underestimated was going to become a recurring theme in my life. Still, I was excited to tell my family about my plans. Stupid, right? But I genuinely believed they'd be proud of me. I had spent months preparing for this, taking a real risk to build something of my own. I scheduled a family dinner at my parents' house on a Sunday to share the news. Big mistake. Huge. I showed up with a printed presentation, yes, an actual slide deck like I was pitching investors. It had market analysis, financial projections, a client pipeline, everything. I was nervous about presenting it, which should have told me something. I arrived around 5 p.m. Derek was already there with his girlfriend, a woman he'd only been dating for about 3 months but who already had a list of preferred wedding venues. They were drinking wine my parents had bought specifically for them, while I was offered a beer from the back of the fridge that had probably been sitting there since 2019. After dinner, I pulled out my laptop and said I had something important to share. Dad already looked annoyed, as if I were interrupting his quality time watching Derek breathe. Mom at least pretended to be interested. I walked everyone through the presentation, market opportunity, competitive advantages, revenue model, growth projections. It was solid work, and I had spent months putting it together. When I finished, there was nothing but silence. Finally, Dad set down his wine glass and looked at me as if I had just announced I was dropping out of school to become a professional juggler. So let me get this straight, he said. You quit your stable job with benefits to start some distribution company out of your apartment? It's more than that, I replied. It's a technology platform that modernizes how... He cut me off. Technology platform, right? And where exactly are you getting the capital for this little venture? I explained that I had saved enough for the initial operations and that once I had proof of concept, I could pursue additional funding. Funding, he said, laughing. You think banks are going to give you a loan? You think investors are going to throw money at some kid who quit his job to play businessman? The disappointment in his voice was so thick it could have been spread on toast. Mom just sat there looking worried, wringing her hands. Dad, the industry is changing. The old model is inefficient. I've already identified. The industry doesn't need changing by you, he interrupted, his voice growing harder. It's worked fine for decades. What it needs is people who understand it, people with experience, not kids with PowerPoint presentations. Then Derek, completely incapable of reading the room, decided it was his turn to contribute. Yeah, man, I don't know. Sounds pretty risky. Maybe you should have stuck with the steady paycheck. Not everyone's cut out for the entrepreneurial thing. This was coming from someone who had never taken a professional risk in his life, never applied for a job without Dad's help, never built anything, and never put himself on the line. But sure, Derek, tell me all about entrepreneurship. I've done my research, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. I've built real relationships with manufacturers. I have clients ready to commit once I'm operational. Clients? Dad repeated as if it were a dirty word. And what happens when those clients don't pay? When your suppliers demand money upfront? When you run out of cash in 3 months? You think you can just come crawling back to a stable job? I'm not planning to fail, I said. Nobody plans to fail, he shot back. But most people do. Especially people who think they're smarter than everyone else in an industry they barely understand. That one stung. I had spent 3 years working in that industry, actually doing the work while he managed people from an office. But pointing that out wasn't going to help. Mom tried to calm things down. Honey, we're just worried about your future. Your father has seen a lot of businesses fail in this industry. He's only trying to protect you. I don't need protection, I said. I need support. Dad stood up from the table. You need a reality check. This whole generation thinks they can skip the hard work and start at the top. You need to put in your time, learn the business properly, and work your way up like I did. I have been working my way up, I replied, frustration starting to show. That's exactly what I've been doing. This is the next step. The next step is job stability and experience, he said, crossing his arms. Not throwing away a good position to chase some fantasy. It's not a fantasy. I have a real plan. You have a dream, he interrupted. And dreams don't pay bills. This is irresponsible. Reckless. I didn't raise you to make stupid decisions like this. The room went completely silent. Derek was smirking into his wine glass. His girlfriend looked uncomfortable. Mom was doing her usual, don't rock the boat routine, avoiding eye contact with everyone. So, you're not going to support this? I asked slowly. It wasn't really a question. Support you throwing your life away? No. Dad's voice was final. I'm telling you right now, if you go through with this, you're on your own. Don't come running to us when it all falls apart. I wasn't asking for money, I said. Good. Because you won't get any. He walked over to the kitchen sink and rinsed out his wine glass as if the conversation was already over. I'm telling you this as someone with actual business experience. You will fail. And when you do, don't expect me to bail you out or help you find another job. You make this choice, you live with the consequences. I looked at my mom, hoping for any kind of support at all. She just gave me a sad, helpless look and said, maybe you should think about this a little more, honey, just to be safe. Derek, never one to pass up an opportunity to be a jerk, raised his glass and said, hey, if you need a reference when you start looking for work again, let me know. I might be able to get you into our mailroom. That's when I closed my laptop, stood up, and headed for the door. Where are you going? Mom called after me. Home, I said, to keep building my business. You're making a mistake, Dad said from the kitchen. A big one. I turned around at the door. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. Dad's expression went cold, really cold. It was that same look he used to give us as kids when we had seriously messed up. If you walk out that door and go through with this, don't bother coming back until you're ready to admit you were wrong. I'm not going to sit here and watch you ruin your life. So that's it? I either give this up or what? He stared at me for a long moment before answering. As far as I'm concerned, if you're stupid enough to do this, you're dead to me. Those were his exact words. Dead to me. All because I wanted to start a business. Mom gasped. Honey, that's too far. No. Dad cut her off. He wants to be treated like an adult making adult decisions? Fine. But he doesn't get to make stupid choices and still expect family support. If he's so confident in this failure waiting to happen, he can do it without us. The thing is, I didn't beg. I didn't break down. I didn't try to change his mind. I just looked him right in the eye and said, okay. That seemed to catch him off guard, like he expected me to fold immediately. You don't mean that, Mom said weakly. I do, I replied. I guess I'll see you around. Or not. Then I left. I got in my car, drove back to my apartment, and didn't cry until I was safely inside with the door locked. Not because I was sad, but because I was furious. Furious at him, furious at Derek, furious at the entire situation. You know what I did that night? I worked on my business. I sent emails to potential clients, refined my supplier list, and kept building my website because screw them. If they wanted me to fail, I was going to prove every one of them wrong. The first 6 months were brutal. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. I was working 80-hour weeks out of my apartment and surviving on the absolute bare minimum. Most days I ate the same meal twice, usually rice with whatever protein happened to be on sale. My apartment was basically half bedroom and half office. I slept on an air mattress on the floor and worked from a used desk I found on Craigslist. Those early months tested everything I thought I knew about myself. There were nights when I'd lie awake on that air mattress at 2 a.m, staring at my phone and debating whether to text my dad and admit defeat. The rational side of my brain could list 100 reasons to quit. I was draining my savings, had no safety net, and was one medical emergency away from financial disaster. But the stubborn part of me, the part that remembered the look on Dad's face when he said I was dead to him, kept pushing forward. I even kept a spreadsheet of every family gathering I wasn't invited to during those first months. Thanksgiving, Christmas, Mom's birthday, Derek's promotion celebration. Every event was supposed to remind me of what I was missing. But honestly, I wasn't missing anything. I was building something. And every family photo they posted on social media without me only added more fuel to the fire. My neighbors in the apartment building probably thought I was losing my mind. I'd be pacing around my living room at midnight on conference calls with suppliers in different time zones, trying to negotiate terms in broken Mandarin I'd learned from YouTube. The walls were thin enough that I'm sure they heard everything. The victories, the rejections, and the moments when I'd hang up the phone and feel like punching a hole through the wall. But I landed my first client within 3 weeks. It was a small manufacturing company that needed a reliable supply of industrial fasteners. Nothing glamorous, but it was real revenue. The owner, Tom, was a gruff 60-year-old who had been in business for 3 decades and had seen every distributor scam imaginable. The reason he gave me a chance was simple. I was the only supplier who showed up to our meeting on time and came prepared with actual market analysis on fastener pricing trends. After my pitch, he leaned back and said, "Kid, I don't know if you're going to make it in this business, but you're the first person in 10 years who actually did their homework. I'll give you a trial order." That trial order was worth $3,200, and it felt like $1 million. Then came another client and another after that. I poured every penny back into the business. I upgraded our technology, hired my first employee, a guy named Joel who was stuck in a dead-end logistics job but shared my vision for where the industry could go. For the first year, we operated out of my apartment, taking business calls on our personal phones and using my living room as storage for product samples. My parents never called. Not once. Mom sent a few short texts now and then, things like, "Hope you're okay," or "Thinking of you." But nothing meaningful. Through relatives, I occasionally heard that Derek was supposedly doing great at Dad's company, getting promoted to senior sales associate or some other made-up title. It didn't matter. I was too busy building something real. By month 8, we had outgrown my apartment and signed a lease on a small 1,200 square foot commercial space. It was mostly warehouse with a tiny office attached. It wasn't impressive, but it was ours. It was a real business location. I hired 2 more employees, and revenue kept increasing month after month. In our first year, we generated $380,000 in revenue. We were only barely profitable after expenses, but we finished in the black. More importantly, we had momentum. Our client retention rate was 94%, and word was starting to spread about a new supply company that actually cared about customer service and modern logistics. By year 2, we crossed the $1 million revenue mark, hired 6 more employees, moved into a larger facility, and started attracting bigger clients who were tired of dealing with old-school distributors that treated them poorly. I never called my parents to tell them any of it. I never bragged on social media. I just kept my head down and worked. Their silence was deafening, but strangely freeing. I wasn't trying to impress anyone anymore. I wasn't waiting for approval. I was simply building something I knew could succeed. By year 3, we were generating $4.2 million in annual revenue and employing 23 people. We had multiple commercial locations, a technology platform our clients genuinely loved, and manufacturer relationships spanning 6 countries. For the first time, I paid myself a real salary. Nothing outrageous, but enough to move out of my terrible apartment and into an actual house. That was also when I received my first inquiry from a venture capital firm. They had been watching our growth and wanted to discuss an investment opportunity. I wasn't even looking for funding because we were already profitable and expanding organically, but I agreed to meet with them. It never hurts to know what your company is worth. In the end, I accepted their offer, an $8 million Series A investment at a $35 million valuation. We used the capital to expand aggressively, hire top-tier talent, and further develop our technology platform. Within a year, our revenue had doubled. I still didn't call my parents. By then, it wasn't even about proving them wrong anymore. They had made their choice and I had made mine. We were living in completely different worlds. Then came year 5, and this is where things get interesting. By that point, we were generating $32 million in annual revenue, employing 140 people across 4 locations, and serving some major clients. We had essentially become the go-to modern supply chain solution for mid-sized and large manufacturers that were tired of doing business the old way. One day, I got a call from an acquisition firm that specialized in industrial consolidation. They represented a private equity group that was buying regional manufacturing and distribution companies and wanted to know whether I'd be interested in selling my company. I wasn't interested, but I listened anyway. It's always useful to know how the market values your business. During the conversation, they mentioned they were also in the final stages of acquiring a regional manufacturing company that had been struggling financially and needed major operational modernization, updated vendor relationships, and streamlined logistics. Then they mentioned the company's name. It was my dad's employer, the company where he had spent 25 years building his career, the same company where he had gotten Derek that comfortable sales job. I casually asked about their plans after the acquisition, and they laid everything out. Their strategy was to eliminate redundant management positions, consolidate operations, and modernize the entire business. Anyone who couldn't adapt to the new systems would be let go. It was the classic private equity playbook. Interesting, I said, keeping my voice neutral. What's the timeline on this? They explained that they expected to close the deal within 6 months, followed by about 18 months of integration. The company has good bones, one of them said, but management has been resistant to change for years. There's a lot of dead weight in middle management that needs to be cleared out. They continued talking, giving me details about the financial structure, operational issues, and leadership positions that would likely be replaced. With every sentence, the picture became clearer. My dad's company was slowly dying, suffering from years of refusing to modernize. And now the vultures had arrived. Then they asked whether I'd be interested not in being acquired but in acquiring them or at least partnering in the operational integration. They had done their research and knew we were the best in the region at what we did. Your supply chain optimization model is exactly what this company needs, the lead partner told me. You could come in as an operational consultant, or we've been authorized to discuss other arrangements if you're interested in taking a larger stake. I told them I'd think about it. The truth was, I didn't need to think about it at all. I already knew exactly what I was going to do. The irony was too perfect to ignore. The son who had been declared dead to his father for starting a business was now in a position to buy his father's employer. The company Dad said would fail had become successful enough to acquire the company where he had spent his entire career. It felt like poetry, dark, twisted, and unbelievably satisfying. The next day, I called my lawyer and my CFO and told them I wanted to explore acquiring the entire company, not just partnering on operations. Yes, it was my dad's employer. Yes, I knew it would be complicated. And yes, I was absolutely sure. We ran the numbers. The company was valued at $18 million, well below market value because it was bleeding money due to terrible operations and outdated systems. We could make it work using a combination of our cash reserves, financing, and bringing the private equity firm in as a minority partner. The deal took 3 months to close. During that time, I had to keep everything completely quiet. I couldn't risk anyone at the company finding out before the acquisition was finalized. On the day we officially closed the deal, I walked into their headquarters for the first time. It was a building I had heard about my entire life but had never once visited. Dad had never invited me there, not even when I was a kid. It was his world, the place where he mattered, and apparently I wasn't welcome there either. The executive team was gathered in the main conference room, around 20 people altogether, including senior managers, department heads, and key personnel. They were all waiting to meet the new owners. I walked in alongside my executive team, our COO, CFO, head of operations, and head of HR, people I had personally hired, trained, and trusted, all fully committed to our vision. I spotted Dad immediately. He was seated near the middle of the table next to Derek, who was staring at his phone looking completely uninterested. Dad looked older than I remembered, more tired. 5 years without speaking does that. Your mental image of someone freezes in time. He didn't recognize me right away. I had changed too. I looked stronger, had a better haircut, and was wearing a suit that actually fit instead of the cheap department store clothes I used to wear. Besides, he wasn't expecting to see me there. Why would he? Our CEO, we had hired him about a year earlier when the company started scaling rapidly. Began the introductions. Thank you all for being here. I know transitions like this can be uncertain. We want to be transparent about our plans and answer any questions you may have. Then he gestured toward me. This is our founder and majority owner. He'll be personally overseeing the operational integration. That was the moment Dad finally looked up from the papers in front of him and locked eyes with me. In the span of about 3 seconds, his face cycled through at least 5 different emotions. Confusion, recognition, shock, disbelief, and finally something that looked like a mixture of anger and fear. Derek jerked his head up from his phone, and his mouth literally fell open. Some of you may have questions about our company. I began, keeping my tone calm and professional. We've spent the last 5 years in industrial supply and logistics. We've grown from a startup into a company generating $32 million in annual revenue by modernizing systems that this industry has left outdated. That's exactly what we intend to do here. Dad's face had turned bright red. He looked like he was trying to decide whether to speak or have a heart attack. I understand that change can be difficult, I continued, deliberately holding eye contact with him. But this company has been losing money for 3 consecutive years. Operations are inefficient, systems are outdated, and the management structure has become bloated. That changes now. One of the other managers, a guy who looked like he'd been working there since the building was first constructed, raised his hand and asked, "What does that mean for current personnel?" "It means everyone will be evaluated based on performance and adaptability," I replied. "We're not here just to cut payroll. We're here to build something sustainable, but that requires people who can operate in a modern business environment. Those who can adapt will have opportunities. Those who can't," I shrugged, "won't." Dad finally found his voice, though it came out strained and almost choked. "You can't be serious." I looked at him as if I had only just noticed he was there. "I'm sorry, you are?" His face shifted from red to nearly purple. "You know damn well who I am." "Oh, right. You're the operations manager." I glanced down at my tablet as if reviewing notes. "We'll need to schedule a one-on-one meeting to go over your department's performance metrics. I'm seeing some concerning trends regarding efficiency ratios and overhead costs." "This is a joke," Derek blurted out. "You can't just—" "I can, actually," I said calmly. "We own the company now. The real question is whether you're an asset or a liability moving forward." The room fell completely silent. Everyone could feel the tension, even if they had no idea what was behind it. Dad pushed himself to his feet, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I need to speak with you privately." "That's not how this works," I replied. "Any concerns can be addressed through the proper channels. HR will be reaching out to everyone individually over the next week." "I'm your father. You're an employee of a company I own," I interrupted. "And right now you're being insubordinate during a professional meeting. I suggest you sit down." Mom had taught me to respect my elders. Dad had taught me that family support came with conditions. Business school had taught me how to keep a straight face during hostile negotiations. I appreciated all 3 lessons. He sat down. He didn't really have a choice with everyone watching. We finished the meeting, reviewed the transition plan, discussed timelines for operational changes, and explained what employees could expect going forward. Everything was professional and by the book. Throughout the entire meeting, Dad stared at me like I was a complete stranger, which, to be fair, I probably was at that point. After the meeting ended, he tried to corner me in the hallway. I was speaking with our head of HR about employee evaluations when I felt his hand grab my arm. "We need to talk," he said in a low, intense voice. "Now." I pulled my arm away. "I'm booked with meetings all day. If you need to discuss something work-related, send an email and schedule time through my assistant." "Work-related? This is about family." "There is no family," I said quietly, making sure only he could hear me. "You made that very clear 5 years ago. I was dead to you, remember? Well, consider this a haunting." His jaw tightened. "You're doing this because you're petty. Because I didn't support your little business." "I'm doing this because it's a good investment," I replied. "The fact that you work here is irrelevant to me. You're just another employee who has to prove his value, same as everyone else. I've worked here for 25 years. And during those 25 years, you've watched operations become less efficient, costs continue to rise, and revenue decline. Your tenure isn't impressive, it's concerning. You've been in leadership for decades without fixing fundamental problems. That one hit him hard. I could see it in his face. It was the moment he realized I wasn't bluffing, that this wasn't some emotional outburst or personal vendetta. I had evaluated his performance the same way I would evaluate anyone else's, with cold objectivity, and the results weren't flattering. The fastener procurement process alone, I continued, takes an average of 47 days from requisition to delivery. The industry standard is 12. Your inventory management system is still running software from 2006. You have 3 employees performing jobs that could be automated with basic modern software. And your vendor relationships are so poorly managed that we're paying 23% above market rates on standard components because nobody has renegotiated contracts in 8 years. His face lost all color because he knew it was true. Deep down, he had always known. He had let things slide. He had been coasting on seniority rather than performance. The only reason nobody ever called him out on it was because he had been there so long that he had become untouchable, until now. "You can't fire me," he said, though there was uncertainty in his voice for the first time. "I won't fire you because you're my father," I said. "I'll fire you if you're not doing your job. So I suggest you start documenting exactly what value you bring to this organization because, based on the preliminary reports I've reviewed, your department is the single biggest operational bottleneck in the entire company." Derek showed up then, looking like he couldn't decide whether to be scared or defiant and somehow landing somewhere in the middle. "This is messed up, man. You can't just—" "What's your exact role here?" I asked. "Senior Sales Associate." "And what were your sales numbers last quarter?" He hesitated. "I don't have them memorized. They're in your file. You've been below quota for 6 straight quarters. Your client retention rate is 61%, which is 30 points below the department average. You have the highest expense report submissions in the entire division, and according to your manager's notes, you spend most of your workday on personal calls and extended lunches." His face immediately went pale. "That's not—" "Those reports are accurate," I finished. "I've reviewed everything." Then I laid it out for him. "Here's what's going to happen. You're being placed on a performance improvement plan. 90 days. You'll have specific targets to hit and specific behavioral standards to meet. If you succeed, great. If not, you're gone." "You can't do this to family," Dad said again, as if repeating it would somehow change reality. "You're right," I replied. "I can't do this to family. But we're not family, remember? You made that decision. I'm just respecting it." The next 2 months were glorious in a way I can't even fully describe. Every department was audited. Every process was reviewed. Every employee was evaluated. I was present for most of it. Not hovering, not micromanaging, just visible. Dad would walk by my office and see me working alongside the same teams he had managed for years, and you could see it eating away at him. He knew I understood the business better than he did. The failure he had predicted was now outperforming the legacy he had spent decades building. And the worst part for him, something I admit without a shred of guilt, was that I was actually good at it. Employees who had been checked out for years suddenly became engaged because someone was finally listening to their ideas. Problems that had lingered for years got solved in a matter of weeks. Dad's operations department was a complete mess. 20 years of "we've always done it this way" had turned it into a Frankenstein monster of inefficiency, redundant positions, outdated software, and processes that made absolutely no sense. We essentially had to tear it down and rebuild it from the ground up. Dad fought every change. He sent long emails explaining why things couldn't be done differently. He called emergency meetings to argue that his methods were better. He complained to anyone who would listen that I was targeting him personally. He wasn't entirely wrong, but he also wasn't right. Sure, I had personal motivation, but objectively speaking, his department was terrible. The numbers didn't lie. After 60 days of evaluations, we started making staffing decisions. Around 30% of the workforce was let go. People who either couldn't or wouldn't adapt. Some were close to retirement and honestly seemed relieved. Others were younger but had spent years coasting without contributing much. Dad survived the first round of cuts, but only barely. We moved him from operations manager to a senior specialist role. It was a major demotion, a pay cut, and it came with no direct reports. He would actually be doing the work instead of simply managing others. He tried to refuse the position. I told him he could either accept it or take a severance package. He accepted the role. He still had bills to pay, and apparently Derek hadn't been helping with household expenses for years. As for Derek, he didn't survive his performance improvement plan. Shocking, I know. To his credit, he did try, but after spending so many years coasting, he genuinely didn't know how to sell anymore. His numbers remained poor, and his behavior never improved. At the 90-day mark, we let him go. That night, I got my first message from him in 5 years. Hope you're proud of yourself. You destroyed your family over a grudge. I didn't reply. I simply blocked his number. 3 months after the acquisition, operations had stabilized. Revenue was moving upward for the first time in years. Customer satisfaction scores were improving. The employees who stayed were engaged, productive, and working efficiently. One evening, I was still in the office reviewing reports long after most people had gone home when I heard a knock on my door. It was Dad. He looked rough, thinner, exhausted, dark circles under his eyes. The last few months had aged him noticeably. "Can I come in?" he asked. There was no demand in his voice this time. It was an actual question. "It's late," I said. "I know. We need to talk. Really talk." I motioned toward the chair across from my desk. He sat down as if even that hurt. After a long silence, he finally spoke. "I made a mistake. 5 years ago. I made a mistake." "Okay," I said. "Okay." That was all I said. "Okay. What do you want me to say?" I asked. "Do you want forgiveness? Absolution? Do you want me to tell you everything is fine now?" He struggled to find the words. I want to understand why you did this. Buying this company. Was it just to punish me?" "No," I answered honestly. "It was a good business decision. The company was undervalued. We had the capital and the expertise to turn it around. The fact that you worked here was just a bonus." "A bonus?" he repeated flatly. "Yeah," I said. "A reminder that the failure you predicted never happened. A reminder that the son you gave up on built something successful enough to buy the company where you spent your entire career. A reminder that your support, or lack of it, didn't matter in the end." He flinched. "I was wrong," he admitted. "About you. About your business. I was wrong." "I know. That's all you have to say?" I leaned back in my chair. "What do you want me to say, Dad? That I forgive you? That we can just move past everything? You didn't just refuse to support me. You disowned me. You told me I was dead to you over a business decision. I was trying to protect you." "No." I cut him off. "You were protecting your ego. You couldn't handle the possibility that I might succeed doing something you didn't approve of. You couldn't handle the idea that I might be right when you said I'd fail, or that I might actually be better at this industry than you were." He didn't argue with me. "And Derek," I continued, "you enabled him his entire life. You gave him everything and expected nothing in return. You turned him into someone who can't function without help. You ruined him by trying to help him, while telling me I'd ruin myself by becoming independent." "I know," he said quietly. "I see that now. He can't keep a job. He can't handle responsibility. Your mother and I have been supporting him financially ever since you let him go." "I didn't let him go," I corrected. "He failed to meet basic performance standards. That's on him. And it's on you for never teaching him that actions have consequences." We sat there in silence for a moment. Finally, he said, "I'm sorry. For all of it. For not believing in you. For choosing sides. For what I said that night. You deserved better." "Yeah," I replied. "I did." He looked down. "Is there any way to fix this? To fix us?" I studied him carefully. The regret was real. The remorse seemed genuine. Part of me wanted to forgive him and try to rebuild something. But another part of me still remembered every dismissive comment. Every time he chose Derek over me. Every holiday and family gathering I wasn't invited to during those 5 years. That part of me wasn't ready. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Maybe someday, but not today." Today, you're just an employee who needs to prove he can adapt to the new systems. Same as everyone else. That's it? He asked. That's it. He slowly stood up. For what it's worth, you built something impressive. I should have said that 5 years ago. Yeah, I said. You should have. He left without saying another word. Over the next year, we completed the integration and completely turned the company around. Revenue increased by 45%, operational costs dropped by 30%, and nearly every major performance metric improved. The employees who stayed were earning more money and dealing with far less chaos. Even Dad eventually admitted that the new systems worked better. He remained in his specialist role, did his job, and stopped complaining. We had a few brief professional interactions, but nothing personal. He came to work, did what was required, collected his paycheck, and went home like everyone else. Derek moved back in with our parents. The last thing I heard was that he had taken a job at a gym trying to sell personal training packages. Apparently, it wasn't going very well. A few months after everything settled down, Mom sent me a long email about forgiveness, family, and moving forward. I read it, but I never replied. I wasn't ready for that conversation. The company I founded is now worth more than $120 million. We're expanding into new markets and building technology that's changing how the industry operates. I bought a house, a nice one, and paid for it in cash. I got a dog. I started dating someone who genuinely respects what I've built. Life is actually pretty great. Do I regret buying my dad's company? Not for a second. Was part of me motivated by proving him wrong? Absolutely. But it was also a smart business decision that made both me and my investors a lot of money. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well and succeeding in exactly the way people said you couldn't. Dad isn't dead to me. He never was. But he's not really my father anymore either. He's a man who used to play an important role in my life and made choices that changed our relationship forever. Today, he works at a company I own, collects a paycheck, and goes home just like 140 other employees. The difference is that those other 140 employees never told their son he was dead to them for chasing a dream. So no, he's not dead to me. But he is unemployed from the position that once made him feel untouchable. And Derek is unemployed from the nepotism-fueled ride he probably thought would last forever. Meanwhile, I'm thriving. I'm building, growing, and succeeding. Turns out I didn't need their support after all. Who would have thought? Okay, fine, I definitely thought so. But it's still incredibly satisfying to prove it.